All right, here we go. Welcome into the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you, no matter where you are or how you're tuned in. Thank you so much for making this show a part of your day. The Niners got blown out against the Arizona Cardinals in Week 18. It marks the end of what was a nightmarish season for San Francisco. They entered 2024 Super Bowl favorites. They finish 6-11, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2020, and everything that really could have gone wrong went wrong for this team. And all year it felt as though when the Niners would take one step forward, they would take two steps back. It is now time to flush an awful 2024. And it is now time on this show to go through my perfect offseason plan. All of the moves, decisions that the Niners need to make to get back to playoff contention in 2025. And of note, the Super Bowl will be at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara next year. Before we do all of that, this is a pivotal, massively important offseason coming up for the Niners. I have you covered every step of the way. This is the largest independently run Niners channel right here on YouTube. So if you want to stay in the know with everything that happens with this football team all offseason, I am here for you. Hit that subscribe button as we approach 154,000 subscribers. The perfect offseason plan. Let's get it underway. I think the biggest area of emphasis and need for the Niners is the offensive line. San Francisco needs to fix it. And I want to see upgrades at left guard, center, and right tackle. And here are 5 reasons, among many reasons, for why I think the Niners need to start investing more draft capital, financial resources, and just put more of a focus toward the offensive line. It has killed you in big games. 2021 NFC title against the Rams, you got bullied in the trenches by Los Angeles. 2022 NFC title game against Philadelphia, they owned you at the point of attack. And then in the Super Bowl in February, Kansas City was dominant with their defensive line against your offensive line. And if you are going to invest in Brock Purdy, you have to protect him and make his job easier. We have seen he is not a quarterback who's going to be able to survive a lot of chaos, a lot of injuries. He needs parts around him to be successful. When he has those parts, he can be elite. But he is not good enough, and really no quarterback is good enough to survive with horrible offensive line play. Kyle Shanahan's offense is also based on the running attack. And this year, this running game was ineffective, inconsistent, was not efficient enough. And part of the reason was Christian McCaffrey being hurt, Jordan Mason being injured. But this offensive line did not run block the way that they usually run block like they have in previous years when they've been kind of a questionable offensive line. If you are able to shore up the offensive line, you can wear teams down throughout the course of a ball game. Look at some of the other teams you're competing against in the NFC. They have great offensive lines. Detroit, they invest in it. Philadelphia, they do too. Green Bay, Minnesota. It's time for the Niners to alter their team-building strategy. And also, bad offensive line play led to red zone inefficiency, a problem all season, and second half woes, because if you watch the game from the sideline, it was the Niners offensive line being pushed back a lot, especially after recess. Number 2, this offseason, the Niners really have to rebuild the trenches in general. We talk about the offensive line, have to do the same along the defensive line. If they want to still run a wide 9, you need to be better at defensive tackle. And since DeForest Buckner left, this team hasn't been the same because they were never able to replace him. They tried, especially with the player like Javon Hargrave. That signing was a miss. They tried in drafting Javon Kinlaw. That draft in the first round and that pick was a miss. But if you are weak along the interior, running a wide 9, teams are going to be able to run it right up the gut against you. And that's been a pretty persistent problem for the Niners of late. And they just need more of an interior pass rush because that has been non-existent. In the regular season finale against Arizona, those players are not good enough to be on an NFL field consistently. And then also, the Niners have to get a top edge rusher. And if their pick comes around in the first round and there's a premier edge rusher available or a premier defensive tackle like an Abdul Carter or a Mason Graham, 2 dream players for this team, I know the offensive line is a big problem. You have to go after those players. Make Nick Bosa's job easier, help out your defense, which then helps out the second line of defense. We saw a linebacker struggle this year. Just in the trenches, you need to improve. Number 3, fire Nick Sorensen and Brian Schneider. Nick Sorensen's defense really got cooked all year long. They were awful on third downs, awful in the red zone. You can say whatever you want to me about the yards that they gave up or how good their passing defense was. Our eyes did not lie to us all season long. This defense stunk. There were blown assignments. There were coverage breakdowns. Players were lost. There was a lack of development. Schematically, I have no idea what the Niners were doing in some instances. There were guys running free. Nick Sorensen was in over his skis. And in the last 2 weeks against Arizona and against Detroit, his defense was dusted. And then the special teams coordinator and Brian Schneider. Over the last several years, the Niners have had some of the worst special teams units in the National Football League. That has to change. Personnel is a problem, so is the coaching. For instance, against Arizona, you're not prepared for a fake punt on a 4th down around midfield in which DJ Dallas just runs up the middle for 22 yards? Nick Sorensen, Brian Schneider, never want to see him a part of this coaching staff again. And with that, we go to number 4. Hire Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. This is a Niners team that, once they were eliminated from playoff contention, looked listless. But before that, they looked spiritless. They looked broken. There was a lack of energy. There was a dark cloud hovering over this team. That Super Bowl hangover lasted throughout the entire course of the 2024 season. And there just wasn't that leader, rah-rah guy who's going to lift others up on that sideline. Kyle Shanahan's not that guy. He's just not. That's not his style of coaching. DeMeco Ryans was. Robert Saleh was for this team. They still have been with their next stops. And I don't think that Shanahan can bring back Nick Sorensen for the sake of continuity. Go after the best defensive coach. You have the personnel to run that system. When he was with New York, they were an elite defense. And I think that he can turn this defensive ship around, which is a sinking ship right now. And there are players on this defense to be able to make that happen. And also, good coaching leads to good player development and maximizing players. Robert Saleh can do that. Nick Sorensen has not been able to do that. Number 5, maybe the biggest question mark for this team this offseason, and one of the biggest question marks and storylines across the NFL. Figure out what to do with Brock Purdy. 1 year left on his contract. He's going to make about $1 million. He has severely outplayed his rookie deal since being Mr. Irrelevant in the 2022 NFL Draft. He has played very elite football when he's been surrounded by really good pieces. This year, I'd say he played at a B-, C+ level. Injuries, bad offensive line play. Kyle Shanahan had a bad year. Defense, special teams, those units did not perform. But Purdy is due for a big contract. What's the best deal for the team is a cheaper deal. The Baker Mayfield contract would be a dream. 3 years, $100 million, $33 million per. Baker outplayed Purdy by a wide margin here in 2024. Purdy, though, is not going to settle for that deal. Everything that I've been told by sources close to the situation. And I don't think he's worth $50 to $60+ million because those types of quarterbacks have to elevate others around them. Purdy can't do that. And so I think the Niners are going to pay Purdy. They want to get a deal done. If the offensive line is better, if Shanahan's better, if players stay healthy, then he can get back to playing like he did last year when he was top 5 in MVP voting. But regardless of the situation, if and when you pay Purdy, please get it done early. Do not let this last well into training camp so that there's a holdout or there's some drama. That's part of the reason with the Ayuk deal, the Williams deal. There were bad vibes around this team in training camp. Can't let that happen and repeat itself. So you tell me, what is the biggest thing that the Niners need to do this offseason? Join the conversation down in the comment section right now, and I have about 10 more things that we're going to get to. First, let's get to our sponsor, our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. NFL playoffs start next weekend, and it's playoff time, so it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football with PrizePicks. Right now, when you play $5, you get $50 instantly. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Our lineup for Week 18, George Kittle, he was taken out of this game late in the first half, so he did not get that touchdown. Joshua Dobbs, more than 6 rushing attempts. He turned it over a ton. Trey McBride, really good tight end, more than 68.5 receiving yards. That's how you do it. You pick more or less on 2 or more players on their projected stat lines, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. We'll put that link down below in the show notes and attached to the pinned comment of this edition of the 49ers Report. Number 6, Niners are in a pretty good cap situation right now, and that money can carry over into next year. Obviously, some of that money might be set aside for the Brock Purdy contract extension, but you can further help your cap situation by signing George Kittle to a contract extension and Fred Warner to a contract extension. George Kittle was right up there with Brock Bowers as the number 1 tight end in the game this year. Went over 1,000 yards again, brings it every week, spiritual leader on and off the field, great locker room guy, consummate pro, most importantly, a great player whose injuries have been overblown. He's been pretty available, and I think he's worth re-signing. It's everything that the Niners are about, and one of the few players that you can always count on. He should not be playing in another uniform for the rest of his career. The same can be said for Fred Warner. Before he suffered that fractured ankle, which he played on after suffering in Week 14, every single game the rest of the way, he's missed 1 game in his career since he was drafted out of BYU in the 3rd round. It's incredible. He was playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level. You have to imagine he comes back off that ankle injury, he can get back to being that guy, and those are 2 pillars of your team. And by giving them extensions, you save some money on the cap. Number 7, move on from Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk. You can save money, and the offense, I think, can be better if you move off of Deebo. With Kyle Juszczyk, I don't think you need to devote a lot of financial capital to the fullback position in 2025. And so I think you need a little bit of a change of scenery. I think the Niners might run it back, but you had to make a difficult decision with Eric Armstead last offseason. I think you should make more difficult decisions with veterans who are getting older this offseason. It's always better to move off a player too early as compared to too late. And then in free agency, let Charvarius Ward walk. I think that he can net $13 to $15 million per year. Niners shouldn't and won't pay that. And then let Aaron Banks go in free agency too. He could get decent money as a left guard option for an offensive line needy team. I know Chris Forster said, I love Aaron Banks. I think he's a great player. That's cap. No, he's not. Not good enough this year. Number 8, Kyle Shanahan. He needs to get a fresh set of eyes on this offense, and he needs to bring in an offensive coordinator. Kind of like the role that Mike McDaniel possessed in 2021 when this offense was creative. Kyle Shanahan, on the script to start games, his offense looks awesome. But after the second quarter, in the second half of games, this offense really just falls flat on its face. Defenses are able to adjust, and I think that Shanahan needs an influx of creativity, new ideas, new concepts, both with blocking, with protection, route running, drop back game, all of that. This offense needs a little bit of an adjustment, a little bit of a tinker. And Kyle Shanahan needs to find a way to be able to come back in games. When he takes the lead on you, they can run it, they can throw it. They're like a bowling ball going down Mount Everest. But when they have to come back in games and they're forced to throw, they really struggle to come back in games through the air. Number 9. This is kind of a strategy here for the front office. Put a second-round tender on Jordan Mason. He is a restricted free agent. What that means is if another team is willing to pay him, then you get a second-round pick back for Jordan Mason if he goes somewhere else. If a team doesn't want to do that, you keep Jordan Mason. He can be your backup running back, and there are a ton of questions around Christian McCaffrey and Isaac Guerrero, who suffered an apparent ankle and knee injury in the season finale against Arizona. Number 10, Build the receiving core around Brandon Ayuk. Hope that he can come back. Awful knee injury suffered against Kansas City. Terrible timing after he signed that deal and hold in all offseason. But Brandon Ayuk was an all-pro last year. Terrific route runner. He can take the top off of the defense, has everything to his route tree. If he can come back and be that player again, he's one of the top wide receivers in the game. Last 2 weeks of the year, we saw some flashes from Ricky Pearsall. He was dominant and put up massive numbers against Detroit. Contested catch against a great DB in Brian Branch. And then against Arizona, on a double move, got past the defense on a long ball, underthrown by Dobbs, came back, caught it, good adjustment, and then caught a touchdown on an in-breaking route when he had a defender right on his back. Tough contested catch. And so I think there's life there. I think there's juice there. I think there's ability there. But part of the reason why I'm willing to move off of Debo, let these other players play. I think that Jacob Cowing has some wiggle. Jawan Jennings had a career year. If he didn't get kicked out against Arizona, he may have had 1,000 receiving yards this year, and that's a pretty good receiving core. Maybe you add another wideout in the draft. It's become a deep position there every year, or you add a wide receiver in free agency. Let's talk draft now. The big needs, offensive line, defensive line. Linebacker is another need. Corner depth is another need, although Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green look to be studs on the outside moving forward. Safety because of the decline in play that we saw from Jair Brown. But with better coaching, can he get back to how he played his rookie year? There's a good player in there. Tight end too. It's always an issue with this team. Wide receiver, running back. You have to hit on this draft like the Niners hit on the draft in 2024. Pearsall, Renardo Green, Dominic Pooney, Isaac Guerrero, Malik Mustafa, Jacob Cowing. Those are 6 players who can be a part of your squad. Number 12. As for some players on this roster who I would retain and bring back, Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, I want to see those players re-signed. I think that they play with a really innate, unique feel. They have instincts. They bring swagger and confidence to this team. They're always around the ball. They did something that the Niners defense did not do this year. They helped generate turnovers. And it was a short sample size. We saw one half this year, one half this entire year, when Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga were on the field together. And they played excellent in the first half against the Rams. And Greenlaw was all over the place. Had 8 tackles in that first half. Tried to play in the second half. Couldn't. Tried to play against Miami the following week. Couldn't. Talanoa Hufanga injured all throughout this year. But those are players who, when they've played for San Francisco and they've been on the field together, the Niners defense has given up less than 20 points per game in their respective careers when they play together. And I think they're important pieces to bring back, and given their injury histories, can you bring them back at affordable rates? Number 13, get Jake Moody out of here. I know the Niners used a 3rd-round pick on him, and because they used a 3rd-round pick on him, they're giving him every chance to be the kicker for this team moving forward. Admit your mistake and just move on. And if you don't move on, you have to bring in a legitimate kicker to compete with Jake Moody, to motivate him, to push him, to test his mental toughness and wherewithal, because ever since that ankle injury that he suffered against Arizona, his confidence was shot. He was a shot fighter. You could see it in his eyes. He had no confidence at all. And he missed another kick in Week 18 against Arizona. Jake Moody, I can't believe the Niners took a kicker in the 3rd round. Can't believe they took a kicker in the 3rd round. Trade up for Trey Lance, taking a kicker in the 3rd round, Cam Latu in the 3rd round. We talk about the lack of depth on this Niners team. Those are the misfires that lead to where you are right now. Number 14, the Niners have to level up with the other teams in the NFC and their NFC West counterparts. They got swept by Arizona. They got swept by the Rams. They split with Seattle. Seattle is an improving team. Sean McVay has won double-digit games in 6 of 8 years with the Rams. The Cardinals have really improved the last 2 years under Jonathan Gannon. And then you have the Niners, who finished 6-11, an aging roster, and all year they won 1 divisional game. That is embarrassing after 2 straight NFC West titles. And so this division is getting better. This NFC has improved mightily. Detroit, I don't think, is going anywhere. We'll see what happens and how they look with their coordinators probably leaving after this year. But, like, Detroit's good. Philly's good. Green Bay's good. Minnesota's good. Tampa Bay's good. Washington is on the come up. Those teams inside the NFC West, did the Niners miss their chance last year? They may have. And number 15, sign Zach Wilson as a high-level developmental backup quarterback. And if Brock Purdy gets hurt, if Brock Purdy struggles, Zach Wilson has mobility. Zach Wilson has an arm. We saw what happened with Baker Mayfield last year, this year. We've seen what's happened with Sam Darnold this year. We've seen what happened with Bryce Young this year. What if I told you this time last year that Bryce Young would be playing better football than C.J. Stroud? You would say, Chase, you're crazy. You're out of pocket. That's nuts. It's true. Bryce Young is playing better right now than C.J. Stroud is. And so Zach Wilson can be that reclamation, developmental project of a quarterback. Had a year to kind of catch his breath, reset a little bit. With Sean Payton, we saw what Sean Payton did with Bo Nix. And the Niners can say, look at what happened with Sam Darnold. Spend a year here, change his career. Spend a year with Sean Payton, spend a year with Kyle Shanahan. We'll get you back. And Purdy has arm issues. Elbow, shoulder. Maybe you get some run. But Joshua Dobbs and Brandon Allen, they're not good enough backup quarterbacks for this team. So what say you? What did I miss for my perfect offseason plan? Drop me some notes down in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.